President Nicolás Maduro from Venezuela called for the unity between the Colombian and Venezuelan peoples in the face of destabilizing attempts by the United States against the region. President Gustavo Petro led a march in favor of peace, sovereignty, and democracy in response to the threat of the United States against the country of the region as well. And Israeli settlers prevented Friday humanitarian aid trucks from entering the Gaza Strip near the Kisifumin crossing. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We'll begin with the news. We were saying it at the beginning. President Nicolás Maduro called for unity between the Colombian and Venezuelan peoples in the face of destabilizing attempts by the United States against the region. During his meeting with the El Gran Topo commune, President Nicolás Maduro highlighted the importance of such brotherhood in achieving the peace and building prosperity with a shared future. In this regard, President Maduro highlighted that in the face of the inability to accuse Venezuela of possessing weapons of mass destruction, the U.S. government had opted to construct a false and offensive narrative against the country. He also reiterated that 94% of the Venezuelan people were against the threat of a military invasion and those who call for it. Venezuela continued advancing in its policies against drugs, and now we have a completely free country in terms of drug trafficking. As they cannot say that Maduro has chemical weapons, for example, because they cannot repeat history like this. I tell the people of the U.S., this is vulgar, this is false, this is completely a way of denying reality, the narrative that they're trying to impose on Venezuela of the Bolivarian Revolution and this worker president, the president that walks day to day with the people, Nicolás Maduro Moros. In this context, the Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro, also asserted that 94% of the Venezuelan people are against the military threat against the country and also against invasion, emphasizing national unity in defense of sovereignty. And we should say to the people of the United States always, the social movements of the world, the social movements of Venezuela, we should say to the people of the United States that if they want another war like Vietnam, now in South America, in the Caribbean, we should ask them if they're really ready to support a war on the people of Colombia, Venezuela, and the entire Caribbean. I can say what the people of Venezuela thinks. The 94% of the people is against the military threat of the United States. It's against those who are calling for invasions. And the regional commanders of the armed forces of Venezuela reject the call for a coup d'etat and a military intervention by the United States at voices from the opposition. The National Bolivarian Armed Forces condemn the recent statements made by the fugitive right-wing extremist Leopoldo López, who called for an invasion of the country. The Venezuelan military affirmed that promoting war and killing people is a despicable act that rejects one's own roots and its own people. The strategic defense regions expressed their repudiation of the destabilizing right wing that aspires to take power by force with the promotion of an intervention by foreign powers. In this context, Venezuela's Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, also urged Washington to present evidence showing the responsibility of the people murdered by the U.S. military in the Pacific.
The United States of America wants to do it with bombs, with missiles, killing children, intimidating fishermen here in the Caribbean, extrajudicially murdering people in the Caribbean while they are working. Where's the evidence against these people who have been attacked? There are more than 30 people who have been announced by the spokespersons of the United States itself, who have died in the Caribbean Sea and in the Pacific, as a result of missiles launched from drones, from boats, from ships deployed in the Caribbean Sea. That's nothing but warmongering.
And Russia cataloged the escalation of the United States in Latin America and the Caribbean as a difficult situation. The Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova expressed the situation in the southern part of the Caribbean Sea continues to worsen. The United States is so desperate to deploy its intelligence agencies to combat drugs and narco trafficking that they should carry out a special operation in Manhattan. That's where the real tragedy lies. Zakharova added that the armed actions of the U.S. military raise more and more concerns. It has been reported that Venezuelan, Colombian, and Trinidadian citizens have died. Furthermore, several sources claim that they could have been ordinary fishermen. To identify with exactitude the people who were on board, it was possible to inspect the vessel in case there were legal grounds for that. The Russian diplomat concludes by saying that they reaffirmed their constant and firm support for Venezuela's leadership in defending national sovereignty. We expressed this in particular during the sessions of the UN Security Council on October 10th and 17th. And also, government data from the United States shows that 78% of those convicted for drug trafficking in that country were U.S. citizens. A report by the TATO Institute revealed that 4 out of 5 people arrested for drug trafficking are from the United States, while the Army attacks boats in the Caribbean, arguing that it is part of a supposed anti-drug campaign. These data refute the discourse of President Donald Trump, who seeks to criminalize migrants for the drug problem in the United States. Since Trump took power, he has accused immigrants of exacerbating the fentanyl crisis in the United States. Also, in response to this, U.S. Senator Ron Paul refutes Donald Trump's statements and affirms that no drugs are produced in Venezuela. He also asserted that the civilian boats attacked by the U.S. military in the Caribbean are outboard motorboats, and that in order for them to reach Miami, they would have to stop and refuel about 20 times. The U.S. politician emphasized that the situation in the Caribbean may be cause for concern, as its government is showing that it can kill people indiscriminately without a declaration of war authorized by government. Now we have a short break coming up, but first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. We continue with more information. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro led a march in favor of peace, sovereignty, and democracy. In a massive mobilization, President Petro responded to the threats of the United States against the countries in the region. In this sense, the president rejected the recent designation imposed by the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, by the United States against his government, and declared that to fight the threats from Washington, people must answer firmly by taking to the streets and demanding the right to peace and democracy. Additionally, the head of state expressed that the so-called war on drugs is actually a program of colonial control over Latin American countries, and affirmed that the United States has not reduced the amount of cocaine in its territory. Mr. Trump is attacking the Colombian leader who has most opposed drug trafficking that is seeking political power and blood in Colombia. Mr. Trump is attacking the leader who is trying to build a people's democracy, transparent and without mafias, and has continuously for years denounced the names of those mafia chiefs who were sitting down in order to make legislation at night while during the day they were making lists of those people that they were ready to massacre. And Venezuela rejected the recent designation imposed by the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, against President Gustavo Petro and other Colombian government officials, as it is an illegal action that violates international law and the United Nations Charter. In a statement, the foreign minister expressed that Venezuela emphasizes that President Petro is the only Colombian president to have confronted the drug trafficking industry and its links to political mafias, including structures with connections to centers of powers in the United States, which demonstrates the retaliatory and extortionate measures of these measures. These designations appear to respond to the interests of transnational mafia groups infiltrated in spaces of power in Washington, rather than to a real fight against illicit economies. The document states that Venezuela demands an immediate end to these coercive practices contrary to international law, and calls on the government of peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean to defend the sovereignty and dignity of our region against all forms of interference. We continue now with other topics. In Argentina, the authorities have imposed an election ban, as it is usual, on the eve of the legislative proceedings. The National Electoral Chamber has announced restrictions on campaign advertising, events, and sport activities in order to guarantee the transparency of the electoral process and protect the will of the voters. The ban was put in place on Friday at 8 a.m. local time, as specified by the designated authority, and will remain in effect until the conclusion of the elections on Sunday, October 26th. Argentina is heading towards its midterm elections with the renewal of a total of 127 deputies and 24 senators. In other topics, tropical storm Melissa leaves at least 3 people dead and a dozen injured in Haiti during a landslide in Fontamara, south of Port-au-Prince. Meteorological authorities issued an orange alert in the southeastern departments of the country. Civil protection authorities warned of heavy rains and the risks of flooding in the coming hours in several departments of the island region. They also reported that the Saint Martin River overflowed, destroying the Saint-Cécile Bridge in the west of the country, while several homes were affected in Port-de-Paix in the northeast. Now we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverages, and much more. Follow our page and activate notifications to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. We continue with more information. Israeli settlers prevented on Friday humanitarian aid trucks from entering the Gaza Strip near the Kisufim crossing. The action was carried out by members of the Zionist movement's so-called Order 9, who stood on the road using even children to block the vehicles' entry to the enclave and preventing the arrival of supplies. The delivery of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip is part of the agreement reached between Israel and the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, so the settlers' blockade constitutes a violation of this pact. The Order 9 movement was established at the beginning of the Israeli attacks on Gaza on the initiative of two West Bank settlers to prevent humanitarian aid from entering the area. And the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, the UNRWA, called on Friday to maintain the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip to restore a safe educational environment. In a statement posted on X, the Deputy Director of UNRWA Affairs in Gaza, John White, said that the Palestinian children in the enclave needed education and that the agency must do everything possible to make that happen. The UN official affirmed that UNRWA remains the largest provider of emergency education in Gaza and is working to create spaces in some schools to resume classes. He also said that the agency is seeking to offer online education with up to 300,000 children in Gaza expected to register for remote learning programs. And we go now to Lebanon, where at least 2 people were killed and 2 others were injured after an Israeli airstrike targeted a car in the southern city of Tul. The Lebanese Ministry of Health reported that Israeli occupation forces continue their attacks against the country, mainly in the southern region, which constitutes a clear violation of the ceasefire agreement reached on November 27th of 2024. A new wave of bombings has been reported since last Thursday, October 23rd. In this regard, Israel argued that the attacks are supposedly targeting infrastructure linked to the Islamic resistance movement Hezbollah. However, the impact is being felt in residential areas. We continue now with other topics. Russia's air defense forces shut down approximately 111 Ukrainian attack drones in the southwest of the country during the last day. Through the Telegram social network, the Russian Ministry of Defense stated that the operations were carried out in 13 regions of the country, including the capital Moscow and the Sea of Azov. For its part, Moscow Governor Andrei Vorobyov reported that the impact of a drone on a residential building caused 4 adults and 1 minor to be injured. In recent months, Ukraine has focused its attacks on refineries, fuel depots, and other facilities of Russia's oil industry. And the Russian government rejected Lithuania's accusations of alleged violation of its airspace by Russian fighter jets. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that on October 23rd, Su-30 fighter jets conducted scheduled training flights over the Kaliningrad region in accordance with the rules for the use of airspace over the territory. The ministry specified that the aircraft did not deviate from their flight path or violate the borders of other states. In this scenario, the Russian government reported that the information on the flight's route was confirmed through objective monitoring tools. And North Korean President Kim Jong-un reaffirmed military and friendly ties with Russia, assuring continued cooperation without hesitation. The leader confirmed the depth of bilateral relations during the initial ceremony for the construction of a museum that is dedicated to the participation of Korean military personnel in operations abroad. In his speech, Kim Jong-un paid tribute to his country's soldiers who participated in the liberation of the Russian province of Kursk alongside Russian military personnel. He also highlighted the event as the beginning of a new history of combat unity and the relations between the two nations, which were consolidated as the most reliable, firm, and invincible in sharing the same destiny. The fourth plenary session of the Communist Party of China concluded in Beijing, where the guidelines for the 15th five-year plan for economic and social development was established. The 20th Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party approved the proposal five-year plan for economic and social development, that is for the years 2026 to 2030, while the country continues to fulfill the main objectives and tasks of the previous plan. The 15th plan seeks to establish a solid foundation for achieving socialist modernization by the year 2035. In this regard, the party's political bureau reported that the new plan aims to continuously improve the quality of life of the Chinese people, as well as advance the self-sufficiency and strengthen scientific and technological capacity. And in other news, on Friday, at least 3.6 million Irish citizens were called to the polls to elect their new president. The Election Commission reported that voting began at 7 a.m. local time and ended at 10 p.m. when the polls closed. Vote counting is expected to begin at 9 a.m. next Saturday, when the successor to Michael D. Higgins, who has been president since the year 2011, will be elected. The latest polls show that legislator Catherine Connolly, known for her strong stance against Israel, has a significant lead with approximately 40% of voter support, ahead of 20% to 25% for her rival Heather Humphreys, who represents the center-right Fine Gael party. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.